Hello friends, welcome to AriserTalent. Today we are going to study natural resources. As we already have studied about air and water, today we are going to start soil. Okay, so today our topic in natural resources, soil. What is soil? The uppermost layer of the earth crust is known as soil. Means the topmost layer of the earth crust is known as soil. Thus we can say uppermost or topmost layer of earth crust is called soil. Okay, as we know there are three layers of earth. Earth has three layers. Earth has three layers. What are they? The innermost is core. This is the innermost layer. Above it is mantle and the topmost is crust. This is the topmost layer of the soil on which we live. Okay, this is the topmost layer of the earth on which we live and it is made up of soil. Now, what does soil contain? As we are talking about soil, so what does soil contain? Generally, soil contains many minerals, water, air, many organic matters, gravel, soil and clay particles, etc. Thus, we can say it contains various minerals, okay, air, water, organic matter, clay, gravel, etc. Okay, so soil contains these main things. Now, how is soil formed? So, let me tell you, soil is formed by the breaking down of rocks and it takes long time to form the soil. That's why it is known as slow process and this is the reason soil is a non-renewable resource. So, how is soil formed? Formation of soil. As I told you, soil is formed by the breaking down of rocks into the small particles by the action of air, water and wind. Thus, we can say formation of soil contains two parts. One is weathering and other is decomposition of organic matter and humidification and mineralization. Okay. So, generally there are two processes by which the soil is formed. One is weathering and another one is decomposition of organic matter and humidification and mineralization. Now, what is weathering? Weathering means this is the process of breaking down of rocks by the action of wind, air and water. Thus, weathering is again divided into three parts: physical weathering, chemical weathering and biological weathering, which is generally done by living organisms. Thus, we can say this weathering. What is weathering? What is weathering? Weathering is breakdown of rocks into smaller pieces by the action of air, water and heat. This is a simple way to understand what is withering. Withering means breaking down of rocks into smaller pieces by the action of air, water and heat. Again, withering is of three types: physical withering, then chemical withering, or third one is biological withering. Okay. When the withering means breaking down of rocks is done by air, water and sun's heat, that is physical withering. Generally it is done by the action of air, water and wind. Okay. What about chemical withering, in which as we all know, water contains carbonic acid. This carbonic acid breaks down the complex compound of rocks and then it converts into the soil, and at the end it contains silica. So we can say chemical withering means carbonic acid of water breaks rocks into pieces, or we can say small pieces. So this is chemical withering, in which acids are breaking down the rocks. So this is chemical withering. Biological withering means in which living organisms, small living organisms breaks down the rocks into small pieces, like lichens and moss. Example, lichens and moss. How do they break down the rocks? Lichens make a layer on rocks and they produce the acid, and that acid breaks down the rocks into smaller pieces. Again, same happens with the moss. Moss also make a layer on the rocks and it break down the rocks into smaller pieces. So thus we can say, when the breaking down of rocks is done by the action of air, water and wind, this is physical withering. It is also done by the heat of the sun and heat of the chemical withering, in which acids break the rocks into smaller pieces. Biological withering, which is done by the living organism. Okay, so thus we can say withering means breaking down of rocks into smaller pieces. Generally it is done by three processes: physical withering, chemical withering and biological withering. Next is how is soil formed. Then the next process is decomposition of organic matter and humidification and mineralization. Next is decomposition of organic matter. And humidification and mineralization. And mineralization. Okay, so decomposition of organic matter, how it is done? Decomposition of organic matter like dead plants and animals is done by the bacteria and fungi. Thus we can say bacteria and fungi decompose dead plants and animals and convert them into humus. into humus. Okay, so this is decomposition of organic matter. Now what is humification? Humification means when these dead plants and animals are decomposed and converted into the humus. Thus it is the humification. What is humification? Humification is the process of breaking down, humification is the process of decomposition of dead plants and animals and they convert into the humus. So what is the humification? Formation of, thus we can say formation of humus by decomposition of dead plants and animals. Means when the dead plants and animals convert into humus by the living by these organisms like bacteria and fungi, this is known as humification. Now what is mineralization? Humification and mineralization. What is mineralization? Release of inorganic matters is known as mineralization. Release of inorganic matter. Like calcium, potassium, etc. That is calcium, potassium, etc. Okay, so this is mineralization. When the inorganic matter like calcium, potassium, etc. releases from the decomposition of dead plants and animals, this is mineralization. Okay, now what happens? When the bacteria and fungi decompose these dead plants and animals, okay, they convert them into the humus and thus the soil becomes fertile. At the end, what happens? The earthworms and centipedes which are present in the soil, they absorb these organic matters like plants and animals, these dead plants and animals, and then they release nitrogen in the soil and then they make it more fertile. Okay, so this is the end process of the formation of soil. At last, earthworm absorb organic matter and releases nitrogen in the soil. Okay, so this is the last or this is the end process of formation of soil. Thus, we can say that soil is formed by the two main processes. One is weathering and another is decomposition of organic matter and humification and mineralization. Once the rocks break down into the soil particles, and then other thing is it becomes fertile by the decomposition of dead plants and animals. Okay, now we will study about the soil profile. Our next topic is soil profile. Soil profile means how many layers are there in the soil. Then we can say generally soil has 4 main layers. At the bottom, there are many big rocks. Generally, this part is known as bedrock. Why it is known as bedrock? Because it does not contain any water and mineral, and plants do not grow here. That's why generally it is known as bedrock. Okay. Then, by the withering of this bedrock, again it converts into smaller pieces. Okay. So, this zone which has bedrock, this zone is generally known as horizon D. And this horizon is known as horizon C, which is made by the breaking down of these bedrocks. Thus, it is horizon C. Okay, it is made up by the withering of bedrock. Above it, there are small fine particles which are generally known as mineral accumulation. It contains minerals and some amount of water. Okay, so thus we can say it contains minerals and some amount of water. That's why it's known as mineral accumulation. And this is horizon horizon B. Okay, above it the layer of humus is present, and we all know it is very essential for the plant growth. It provides main nutrients and minerals to the plant for the growth. This layer is made up of humus. Okay. Plants grow here. This is humus layer, and this is horizon A. Plants grow in this layer because whatever they need, like plants need water, minerals, air. Okay, so this contain humus, this layer is rich in humus, and it gives all the essential nutrients and water and air to the plants for growth. This is horizon A. Okay, thus we can say soil contains 4 main layers: humus, mineral accumulation, then again smaller pieces of rocks, and last one is bedrock. Now we will study what does soil contain, or we can say composition of topsoil. What is the topsoil made up of? Composition of topsoil. Okay. As we all know, plants grow in the topsoil. Then what is it made up of? What is the composition of topsoil? Thus we can say it contains gravel particle, it contains sand particles, okay, it contains silt particles, and it contains clay particles. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about gravel particles, or we can say gravel. Okay, so these are the large particles. Generally, if we talk about the size, then they are found in they have 2 millimeter in diameter, okay, and they are large in size, that's why they can be easily picked up by hands. If we talk about sand particles, then if we talk about the diameter, then they varies in size generally, okay. So they are from 0.05 millimeter to 2 millimeter in size, okay. They can be seen by naked eyes. If we talk about silt particles, then they are smaller in size. Even we can say that diameter of these particle can be 0.05 millimeter to 0.05 millimeter, okay. And if we talk about clay particles, then they are smallest particles in size, okay, and they can be less. If we talk about the size, then size can be less than 0.05 millimeter, okay. So on the basis of these particles, soil is of different types. Now we will study types of soil. Types of soil. So on the basis of these particles, soil is generally of 3 types: sandy soil, clayey soil, and loamy soil. Okay, so if we talk about sandy soil means it contains sand particles, it contains sand particles, okay, it cannot hold water, that's why it's dry in nature. Do not contain water, dry in nature, and it is found in desert. Generally found in desert. Okay, sandy soil means it contains sand particles, it do not contains water, that's why it's dry in nature and generally found in desert. As it do not contain water in good amount generally, so that's why plants do not grow in sandy soil, it is found in desert. If we talk about clay soil means it contains a good amount of clay particles, it contains clay particles, or we can say it contains a good amount of clay particles, good amount of it contains good amount of clay particles. Okay, and some amount of silt and humus, some amount of silt and humus. It contains a good amount of water, contains good amount of water. Okay, so plants can grow in clay soil. Let's talk about loamy soil. Loamy soil contains clay, humus, silt, okay, and it can contain water, it can contain air too, that's why it is good for growing plants. It contains humus, silt and clay. It contains a good amount of water, water, and it also have pores for the air. That's why plants can grow here easily. It contains water and air, and plants easily can grow in loamy soil. Easily grow in loamy soil. Okay, so on the basis of composition of topsoil, as we know, topsoil contains gravel, sand particles, silt particles and clay particles. On the basis of composition, soil is of three types: sandy soil, clayey soil and loamy soil. Sandy soil contains sand particles, it do not contain water, that's why it's dry in nature, and generally it is found in desert. As it do not contain water, plants cannot grow here. Clayey soil, it contains good amount of water good amount of clay particles, some amount of water, humus, and plants can grow here. Loamy soil, it contains a good amount of humus, silt and clay. It contains water, it has pores for the air, that's why it is good for growing plants. Okay, now we will study about soil pollution, how the soil get polluted and what are the harmful effects of it. Okay, so this is the thing, what is the composition of topsoil and types of soil. Now in our next lecture we will study about types of what is soil pollution and how the soil get polluted. Thank you.